One evening, as she returned from the river, she found him waiting under the baobab tree. "You can pretend," he said softly, "but the river doesn't lie. It carries what you drop, but it always remembers." Her voice shook. "You speak of things that should not be spoken. And you live a life that should not be lived," he countered. His eyes glistened, half fury, half longing. Before she could reply, footsteps approached, Tembi's voice calling her name. She panicked, her heart racing, and fled into the night. But in that moment, the seed was planted. A seed of desire, of betrayal, of destiny waiting to bloom. The story of Zanele began in Ndala, a village wrapped in the embrace of two rivers. By day, the air smelled of palm oil and wood smoke, and by night, the air buzzed with the voices of spirits believed to live in the water. Life followed rhythms: planting, harvest, festivals. Yet beneath the harmony lay unspoken tensions, desires, and secrets. Zanele was admired by many. Her beauty was not loud but haunting, like the fragrance of hibiscus flowers after rain. She was married to Tembi, a man once celebrated for his poetry. Elders remembered when Tembi's voice, strong and smooth as river stones, filled the air with verses about love and freedom. But those days had withered. When Tembi's father died, leaving him the family's trading business, poetry was replaced by ledgers and metaphors by cowries and contracts. He wore fine cloth now, but his voice grew quiet, his laughter rare. Zanele's days stretched long, caring for the home, weaving cloth, attending village gatherings. Yet, in her eyes, a storm brewed. At night she lay beside her husband, listening to the distant cry of hyenas, wondering why her heart felt like a caged bird. One humid evening, the air smelled of rain, though the skies were clear. A caravan arrived from the city, bringing goods, news, and faces both new and old. Among them was Kofi, Tembi's childhood friend. Kofi was the opposite of Tembi, restless, fiery, his spirit untamed. His dreadlocks swayed as he walked, and his hands carried stains of paint and charcoal. He had left Ndala years ago to chase dreams of art in the bustling city. Some whispered he painted not just with colors but with shadows, capturing people's souls on his canvases. When Tembi saw him, he embraced him with stiff formality. "Kofi," he said, voice flat, "Ndala welcomes you again." But when Kofi's eyes met Zanele's, something unspoken passed. A spark too quick for anyone to name, yet too bright to ignore. The days that followed brought unease. Kofi painted murals on the walls of the village square. Rivers twisting into serpents, women with eyes like flames, men dancing with masks that seemed too alive. Children followed him, enchanted by his stories of the city. Women gossiped about his wild energy. Elders frowned, saying, "A man who carries fire in his chest will one day burn the village." For Zanele, Kofi's presence was both terrifying and intoxicating. One afternoon, while fetching water at the river, she found him sketching on a slab of bark. "You stare at the water as if it hides your reflection," he said, without looking up. Her hands trembled on the calabash. "I only see what I must see," she said. Kofi finally lifted his gaze, eyes sharp, mischievous. "No, you see what you're told to see. But there's more in you, Zanele. I see it." Her chest tightened. She hurried away, but his words clung to her like the river mist. Soon came the Festival of Masks, the most awaited celebration of the year. The village square glowed with lanterns, drums thundered, and dancers in carved masks leapt like spirits. Tradition held that during the festival, the line between the living and the ancestors thinned, and secrets often slipped into the open. Zanele moved among the crowd with Tembi at her side, his face stern as always. But her eyes kept searching, unwillingly, for Kofi. And then she saw him, painted in ash and red dye, wearing no mask but carrying his raw face like defiance itself. He danced wildly, like a man possessed, until his eyes locked with hers. For a fleeting moment, she felt the world tilt. The drums slowed in her ears, the firelight dimmed, and it was as if only the two of them existed. Tembi noticed her stillness. Zanele, he muttered.
Do not stare at fire.
Do not stare at fire. It blinds, but she could not forget. That night, lying beside her husband, she remembered Kofi's movements, his gaze, the dangerous freedom he carried. She turned to Tembi, seeking warmth, but he was already asleep, his back turned. Days passed, and whispers began to swirl. Some said they saw Kofi and Zanele talking too long at the riverbank. Others claimed Kofi painted a woman in his hut, whose figure looked too much like her. Suspicion grew, though no one dared speak it aloud. For Zanele, the struggle was silent but violent. She tried to bury her thoughts, to busy herself with weaving and cooking. But every sound of Kofi's laugh in the distance tore at her resolve. One evening, as she returned from the river, she found him waiting under the baobab tree. "You can pretend," he said softly, "but the river doesn't lie. It carries what you drop, but it always remembers." Her voice shook. "You speak of things that should not be spoken. And you live a life that should not be lived," he countered. His eyes glistened, half fury, half longing. Before she could reply, footsteps approached, Tembi's voice calling her name. She panicked, her heart racing, and fled into the night. But in that moment, the seed was planted. A seed of desire, of betrayal, of destiny waiting to bloom. The rains had come. For weeks, Ndala was drenched in water that turned paths into mud and fields into emerald seas. The river swelled, rushing with power, carrying logs and secrets alike. And in that season, Zanele felt her own heart flood, restless and uncontained. Tembi had grown quieter with the rains.
Fair for such
He
a
spent
difficult
long hours
season.
in the storehouse,
I trust
counting
you find
sacks
them
of
agreeable.
millet, bargaining with traders and writing figures late into the night. Zanele sometimes sat across from him, weaving cloth, hoping he would look up, speak, or even smile. But his eyes remained on his papers. "Do you remember," she whispered one evening, "when you used to recite poems under the mango tree?" He didn't glance up. "Poems do not fill stomachs, Zanele. Trade does his words cut her." She went to bed that night feeling invisible, as if her soul had been folded away like unused fabric. Kofi, however, was everywhere. He painted even as the rains lashed the village, creating wild murals on mud walls that dripped with color. He told children tales of cities where towers touched the clouds and women danced in firelit streets. The youth adored him. The elders distrusted him. And Zanele? She avoided him, or at least tried to. But every path seemed to lead to him. At the river, at the market, at the festival rehearsals. His presence was like the drumbeat in her chest, impossible to silence. One afternoon, she was gathering herbs when Kofi appeared, holding a canvas smeared with crimson and gold.
Zanele?
"Do you want to see yourself, Zanele?" he asked. She froze. On the canvas was a woman with eyes blazing like the sun, lips parted as if to speak forbidden truths. The figure was hers, unmistakably hers, but not the quiet Zanele of the village. This woman was wild, alive, dangerous.
Why
would you do this? She whispered, trembling. "Because it is you," he said. "The you that Tembi has caged. The you that waits to fly." Her hands shook as she pushed the canvas back. "This is madness." Kofi leaned closer, his voice low. "Madness is living a life that isn't yours." It wasn't long before rumors grew louder. Women fetching water whispered behind calabashes. Hunters passing by Kofi's hut at night claimed they heard voices, laughter, whispers, footsteps.
He'll hear us.
One afternoon, Zanele's childhood friend, Amale, caught her alone. "Zanele," she said, eyes sharp, "the village speaks. They say Kofi's eyes follow you like a shadow. Tell me it's not true."
Be careful, sister.
Zanele's throat tightened.
Fire warms.
"People see what they want to see." Amale sighed. "Be careful, sister. Fire warms, but it also destroys." Her words haunted Zanele, but so did Kofi's eyes. The rains ended, leaving the earth steaming, the air heavy with renewal. That night, the village gathered for a moonlit dance. Drums echoed across the plains, Young men leapt with spears, and women sang songs older than memory. Tembi, as always, stood apart, his arms crossed, eyes scanning for traitors even in moments of joy. Zanele's heart ached at his absence even while he stood beside her. And then Kofi appeared, draped in cloth dyed scarlet. He moved with the music, every gesture bold, his laughter loud. When his gaze found Zanele's, it was as if the drums stopped. Later, when the crowd dispersed, she found herself drawn away, her feet carrying her toward the baobab tree. He was already there, waiting. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "And yet you came," he said softly. The silence between them was thick. Then, like a storm breaking, he reached for her hand. His touch burned, alive with all the passion missing from her nights. "Zanele," he murmured, "the river runs where it must. So do hearts." Her breath caught, torn between fear and desire. For a moment, she let herself lean into him, the night swallowing her doubts. But before their lips touched, a voice shattered the moment. "Zanele!" It was Tembi. He stood at a distance, eyes dark, unreadable. Zanele jerked back, her heart pounding. I was looking for you, Tembi said quietly. His gaze slid to Kofi, then back to her. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Kofi's jaw tightened. He suspects. Zanele's voice trembled. Then this must end. But in her heart, she knew it would not. From that night, Tembi changed. He became colder, sharper. His words clipped. He watched her more closely, though he spoke little. Zanele felt his eyes like weights, pressing her down. One evening, as she served him food, he said without looking up, "The village whispers." "Do you hear them, Zanele?" Her hands shook. "They whisper always, about everyone." He finally looked at her, his eyes like stone. "Some whispers drown in the river. Others rise like storms. She could not eat that night." She lay awake, listening to his steady breathing, while her own chest heaved with guilt and fear. Days turned into weeks. Zanele tried to distance herself, but the pull was too strong. Kofi sought her out, bold and relentless. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every brush of fingers was a fire she could not smother. Finally, one stormy night, when thunder rolled over Ndala, Zanele slipped from her hut. She told herself she was only going to speak to him, to end it once and for all. But when she reached his hut, dripping from the rain, Kofi pulled her inside. His hands, warm and insistent, erased her protests. His lips silenced her words. And in that moment, Zanele surrendered, to desire, to danger, to the river that had been calling her all along. Outside, lightning split the sky. Inside, a secret was sealed. The rains had passed, but the air in Ndala was heavy with secrets. The earth smelled of wet clay, and the river ran swollen, its voice louder than before, as if it too carried whispers it could not hold. Zanele lay awake many nights. Her body curled beside Tembi, while her heart drifted elsewhere. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kofi's hands, Kofi's eyes, Kofi's hunger. And every morning, she saw the quiet weight of her husband's gaze. Sometimes she told herself she would end it, that she would walk away from the fire before it consumed her. But then Kofi's shadow would appear at the edge of her path, or his laughter would echo in the marketplace, and all her resolve crumbled like dried leaves. Her guilt was a stone in her chest, yet her desire was a tide too strong to resist. One evening, the village prepared for the drummers' gathering, a night when musicians from nearby villages came to test their rhythms against each other. The square was alive with firelight and pounding beats. Kofi sat on the edge of the crowd, sketching the dancers, while Zanele pretended to focus on the women beside her. But when the drums reached their peak, one of them suddenly split with a sharp crack, silencing the rhythm. The elders muttered uneasily. A broken drum during a gathering was an omen, a warning that harmony had been disturbed. Some glanced at Kofi, others at Zanele, as though their secret sins had somehow rippled into the night. Her heart pounded. She felt as if the village itself was watching her. Despite her fear, the meetings continued. Kofi's hut, hidden among banana groves, became their sanctuary of stolen hours. He painted her again and again, on bark, on cloth, on walls, sometimes as a goddess draped in fire, sometimes as a woman with tears burning like rivers of gold. You are everything they fear, he whispered once, tracing her cheek. They want you silent, obedient. But I see your storm, and storms destroy, she murmured. Only what was weak to begin with. Tembi, meanwhile, grew restless. He no longer stayed late at the storehouse. He returned early, watching her with eyes that searched too deeply. He asked where she went, why she lingered, why her eyes seemed far away. One afternoon, as they sat for a meal, he said quietly, I saw footprints outside Kofi's hut. 2 sets, a woman's and a man's. Her heart nearly stopped. Many women visit him, she lied, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Tembi stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Yes, many women, but only one with feet that walk from my house. She could not eat another bite. The next week, a child from the village, little Kwame, ran to Zanele's hut carrying something. It was a small piece of cloth, torn, red with paint. I found this near Kofi's hut, he said innocently. It looks like yours, Auntie. Her breath caught. It was hers. A piece of her wrapper, snagged on a branch the last time she slipped away. She forced a smile, gave the boy a cola nut, and told him not to speak of it. But the incident left her trembling. It was no longer just whispers. Now there was evidence, trails, danger. When the harvest season arrived, the village gathered for Thanksgiving. Drums, dances, feasts. The air was alive with joy. Yet beneath it all, Zanele felt doom tightening like a noose. During the feast, Kofi approached her boldly, offering her roasted yam. Their hands touched briefly, and her heart leapt in panic. Across the square, she saw Tembi watching, his face unreadable. Later that night, as lanterns flickered and songs filled the air, Tembi spoke to her in a low voice. Zanele, I once wrote poems of love. Do you know why I stopped? She shook her head, her throat dry. Because love is fragile, he said, his tone calm yet chilling. When you give it words, people find ways to break it. But silence hides the cracks. She did not sleep that night. A few days later, Tembi finally confronted Kofi. It happened at the edge of the river, where men gathered to mend nets. I know what you are doing, Tembi said, his voice low but trembling with fury. Kofi met his gaze without fear. And what am I doing, brother? You are poisoning my home. Or maybe I am giving life to what you let die. The men nearby froze, sensing danger. Tembi's fists clenched, but he walked away, his silence heavier than blows. Word of the encounter spread quickly, feeding the fire of gossip. The village was now divided. Some sided with Tembi, the faithful husband. Others admired Kofi's boldness, though they would never admit it openly. Zanele felt the walls closing in. Every glance from neighbors felt like accusation. Every silence from Tembi felt like a storm waiting to break. And yet, she could not stop. The more danger pressed in, the more she sought Kofi. Their nights became desperate, frantic, as if passion itself could outrun the truth. But truth, like the river, always finds its way. One evening, as they lay tangled in Kofi's hut, a sound froze them both. Footsteps outside. Someone was there, listening. Zanele's heart thundered. Kofi rushed outside, but the shadows revealed no one. Only the rustle of leaves, only the whisper of the river. But she knew. Someone had seen. Someone had heard. The night after the festival burned in Zanele's memory like a forbidden brand. She had given in to Kofi's hunger beneath the veil of music and shadows. When she returned home, her body was still trembling, her soul torn between guilt and intoxication. I am a wife, she whispered to herself as she scrubbed her hands in a basin of water. I am Tembi's wife. But no matter how fiercely she tried to wash, Kofi's touch clung to her skin like fire. Tembi returned home later than usual that night. He reeked of palm wine and cigarette smoke. His eyes were bloodshot, his silence heavier than stone. He placed a packet of dried fish on the table and simply said, "Eat." There was no warmth in his voice, only exhaustion. He didn't notice the redness in Zanele's cheeks, or the way her hands trembled. Or perhaps he noticed, but chose silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than words. For weeks, Tembi had been retreating further into himself. His poetry lay untouched, his pen dry, his dreams crushed by the weight of debts he could never repay. Zanele felt she was living with a ghost, a man who existed only in shadows. And so, she began seeking light elsewhere. Kofi became her secret flame. They met by the river, in hidden corners of the village, under the canopy of palms, where moonlight fractured like silver on the water. At first, Zanele resisted him, ashamed of what she had done. But Kofi was relentless. He painted her body with words, told her she was not just a wife but a goddess, not a prisoner but a queen who deserved to be worshipped. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Kofi whispered, "If your husband cannot see you, if he buries himself in silence, then why should you remain buried with him? Let me bring you back to life." Her breath faltered. She knew it was wrong, but in that moment his lips became the storm she could no longer escape. But nothing remains hidden forever. Whispers began to spread. Children saw shadows move strangely by the river at night. An old woman at the market caught Zanele's flushed face one morning and muttered, "A woman in fire cannot hide her smoke." And then came the night Tembi found Kofi's shirt in their courtyard, forgotten after he had snuck through the back gate. Tembi picked it up, staring at it for a long time. He knew the pattern, the smell of paint, the mark of another man. His hands trembled, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He simply folded the shirt and placed it on the table. When Zanele saw it, her heart stopped. Tembi's silence was worse than anger, worse than shouting. It was the silence of a storm gathering strength, waiting to strike. The next week, the village prepared for the grand festival of masks, the most sacred event of the season. Drums echoed through the night. Dancers painted their faces with ancestral designs, and the riverbank glowed with torches. Tembi stood among the crowd, his face stern, his eyes searching. Kofi painted the festival masks, his hands bold, his smile hiding a restless hunger. Zanele moved between them, her heart split in two, her soul unraveling with every beat of the drum. At one moment, she caught Tembi's gaze across the firelight. His eyes burned not with love, but with something colder, something final. That night, as the rains finally broke after weeks of heat, Tembi asked Zanele to walk with him by the river. The water roared louder than ever, swollen by the storm. Lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled over the land. Tembi stopped, turning to her slowly, his face half lit by the fire of the storm. "Tell me, Zanele," he said at last, his voice steady. "When did I lose you? Was it the day I stopped writing, or the day you stopped waiting?" Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. And then from the shadows, Kofi appeared, reckless, desperate, unwilling to let go. "She was never yours," Kofi growled. "She deserves to breathe, to live, to be free. And with me, she can." The storm screamed around them. 3 souls caught in a web of love, betrayal, and rage. And in that instant, Zanele realized the night would end in fire. Blood, or both. The storm did not wait for decisions. It swallowed them. The rain hammered the riverbank, turning the soil into mud, making every step feel heavier, as though the earth itself knew blood was about to be spilled. Tembi stood tall, his soaked shirt clinging to his thin frame. His eyes were no longer tired, no longer hollow. They burned with a dark clarity. "Zanele is my wife," he said, his voice steady against the roar of thunder. "And I will not watch you steal what little life I have left, Kofi." Kofi stepped forward, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. His shadow stretched across the lightning-lit ground like a predator's. She doesn't belong to you, Tembi. She belongs to herself. And if she chooses me, then it is you who must let go. Zanele's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to beg them both to stop, but her voice drowned in the storm. The men's pride, their pain, and their desperate love for her had fused into something unstoppable. Tembi struck first. His fist collided with Kofi's jaw, sending the painter stumbling back into the mud. Kofi spat blood, then lunged with animal fury, tackling Tembi to the ground. They rolled dangerously close to the river's edge, the swollen waters clawing at them like a beast waiting for prey. Zanele cried out, rushing forward, but a wild swing from Kofi nearly caught her. She stumbled back, trembling, helpless as the two men tore into each other. Lightning flashed, Tembi's hand around Kofi's throat. Thunder cracked, Kofi's knee driving into Tembi's ribs. The fight was raw, brutal, fueled not only by betrayal but by years of buried frustration. And Zanele stood frozen, realizing this storm was not about love anymore. It was about destruction. For one terrible moment, Tembi gained the upper hand. He forced Kofi's head into the mud, pressing down with all his strength. Kofi choked, clawed, his eyes bulging with panic. Zanele screamed, "Stop, Tembi! You'll kill him!" Tembi turned his head slowly toward her, his face twisted with rain and rage, and in that instant of distraction, Kofi's hand found a stone. With a desperate roar, Kofi swung. The stone cracked against Tembi's temple. Tembi's eyes went wide, his body stiffened, and then, with the weight of the storm pressing down, he toppled backward into the raging river. Gone. Zanele's scream tore through the night, louder than the thunder. She fell to her knees, clawing at the mud, reaching for a man who was already swallowed by the darkness. Kofi, panting, bleeding, trembling, dropped the stone from his hand. His chest heaved with the horror of what he had done. Zanele turned to him, her face streaked with rain and tears, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You didn't save me, Kofi," she spat. "You destroyed me." He reached for her, desperate, broken. "Zanele, I did this for us." But she recoiled, and in that moment, something inside her snapped. She lunged forward, shoving him with all the strength of her grief. Kofi staggered, slipped on the mud, and fell backward. The river caught him too, thrashing, pulling, dragging him into the same watery grave as Kofi. Two men. Two loves twisted by pride and betrayal. Two lives claimed by the river's wrath. The storm eased by dawn, leaving the village silent and broken. Zanele stood alone on the riverbank, her clothes torn, her eyes empty. The people whispered when they saw her, some with pity, some with suspicion, some with fear. She had lost everything in one night. Her husband, her lover, and the fragile pieces of her soul that had been caught between them. As the sun broke through the clouds, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling but cold. Love is not fire. Love is not freedom. Love is a storm, and it always takes. And with that, she walked away from the river, carrying the silence of two graves inside her.